today's video, we'll be guiding you through architectural presentation boards. We will talk about structure, layout, composition, orientation, size, fonts, and basically the whole shebang. And by the end of this video, presentation boards will be a piece of cake for you, and you will hopefully no longer struggle to come up with boards and layouts. So let's get into it. Before you start your next presentation board, it is important to develop your presentation skills. How to sell your projects to clients, because essentially that is what presentation boards are. I know that presenting can be intimidating to say the least. So if you're trying to develop your confidence during public speaking, then have a look at Skillshare. Massive thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring today's video. And if you don't know what Skillshare is, it is basically an online learning community with more than 25,000 classes in design, business, and more. And if you get premium membership, you will get unlimited access to all of those learning classes. This course, for example, by Alex Leon, teaches you how to open and close your public speaking presentations like a boss. The class is designed for students who already have some basic experience with public speaking and just want to take their presentation skills to the next level. I personally struggle sometimes with public speaking because I am just a naturally shy person, and I think that the classes on Skillshare are really useful. If you're not into public speaking, Skillshare has so many tutorials on Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign so that you can learn the programs before you start using them for these boards. And the best thing is that Skillshare is also super affordable, as the annual subscription is less than $10 a month, and Skillshare has provided us with the amazing deal. The link in the description will get a 2-month free trial, and you can cancel at any time, so you should definitely sign up and give it a try. Bring your work together as a unified selection of drawings with a format, scale, and style that works together to create a logical and comprehensive view of the project. Different graphic styles and inconsistencies can cause a lack of clarity and confusion. And in general, we read design presentations from left to right and top to bottom. So consider the story of your design and how it will be read. For story, you need to explain your design process. Why is this concept important? Why is it beneficial? And then how it was implemented into your design to give a whole rounded story. So usually the structure of presentation boards will contain project title, research, concept, plans, sections, elevations, rendered 3D perspectives, and then finally structure or technology. These are the main elements that should be included in every project. You should also include concept and development sketches, even if they're not perfect scale drawings, but just a side panel of quick vignettes. The structure of your presentation boards will often change depending on what project you are presenting, what the project brief requires of you, and what are the key elements that explains your big idea. How I get some ideas of what I could include in my presentation boards is by looking at real-life projects. So for example, BIG architects show diagrams and their presentation boards, although personally I don't really like their site, I find it so confusing. But you can still get inspired by their strategy and concept, so it's a win-win scenario. Also, you can look at Pinterest, and I look for projects of similar type. So I look for urban projects if I'm doing urban and just see what other students are doing. And another thing that I always recommend you guys do is to look at precedent medals, and those would be projects of definite high quality. Most of the time, your professors will restrict you to a specific board size and a number of boards. If that is the case, then you need to confirm if your boards should be presented in a landscape or portrait orientation. You also need to decide if you will be presenting your boards side by side as a one big board, one poster of an equivalent size, or as separate boards that come in a sequence. But if you had your total utter freedom to do whatever floats your boat, then I think you need to figure out what best tells your story. But me personally, I always love a series of boards. It just conveys a story really well, but one board is always the easiest option. I would recommend sketching out your layout before you start, so you can get an idea of the possible configurations you can use and what might work best. If you will be presenting CAD drawings, then this might be easier, because you can experiment with the actual drawings on Photoshop after you scale them if you will be rendering your project digitally. there are mainly 3 types of layouts. I personally always go for a grid layout because it is so easy to make and easy to understand. Consider using a grid to help you organize the visual elements on your board. You can use a simple grid or something more complex. A grid just helps you organize the elements on your page, and it produces consistency across the presentation board set. The next 2 layout styles are the more creative. So the main image layout is where you have a large image that the project is centered on, and then you have a complementary images that supplement it. And then the free flowing, which is my favorite style, but I don't usually do, is a blend board. So there isn't really independent images, but there is a general style of composition that blends them all together. This style of presentation board will only work in Photoshop or Illustrator, as InDesign doesn't have the tools to edit images in that way. For hierarchy, you need to think about what is your strongest point, the highlight of your project. Consider the visual hierarchy. You will want some of your images to receive more visual attention than others in order to communicate your idea. Make sure you plan out your board so that you can see the relationship between the drawings. So for example, sections and plans should be aligned so that it's clear to read. Make sure that all of the plans is of the same orientation. North point always in the same place. I always put it in the top right corner, but you can do whatever you want. Otherwise, it can get very confusing for someone who has not seen the project before. And don't forget to write your name. Do I need to say any more about that tip? For backgrounds, it is very easy to choose bold colors or a background texture, but try to keep your background plain, unless it's featured in one of your key images. A white background will just make your images and text stand out and look professional. Most of the board images I'm sharing in this video feature white background. It is clear to see why the information just comes across so well, and the background makes the visuals pop off the page. I sometimes go for a light gray as well to give this more muted, minimalist theme to my boards. I don't recommend going with the black background route because it can be very hard to read. With text, it is so tempting to get carried away with multiple fonts because you can, but please don't. Stick to one font or just combine 2. I personally combine 2. I'll use a font size to create hierarchy on the board, so large fonts for your titles, a bit smaller for the subtitles, and a standard size for the remainder of your content. And make sure that your chosen font and size is readable. What you could do is print a section of your board onto an A3 and pin it somewhere, and then stand back and see if you can actually read it. How is color reflected in the design? If the board is predominantly in black and white or gray, does that make the design feel cold? Consider using color as a feature in your diagrams, and that is spread across your multiple boards. Some extra tips: please give yourself time. It's a real shame when you have spent weeks and months on a design project and leave yourself an hour or 2 to put it together for your presentation boards. Use negative space. Let your images breathe and add some white space. Minimize text on your presentation boards. Write short and concise concept statement and add a very brief explanation if needed. And then lastly, please use a program that you know. The last thing you need to be doing is learning a whole new software while in the panic of putting your boards together. I would always recommend using InDesign, Photoshop, or Illustrator for these boards. Definitely whenever you have free time, check some tutorials online, maybe on Skillshare, and try to understand these programs before you have to actually use them. And I hope that these tips help you come up with some good presentation boards and show off your work to its best. Leave me in the comments down below if you would like to see any of these tips in more detail. I'm Rasha Shururu, and I will see you next time.